Okay, so back with another list right here. I'm going to be doing top 10 defensive coaches. So, what that means is whether you're a coordinator or a head coach, just how well do you run your defense? If you are a head coach, you're still eligible to be on this list, but I am not taking into account your head coaching duties. I don't care about how well do you challenge. I don't care about how well do you lead. It's simply just how well do you get the most out of your defense. So, that's the way I'm going to be evaluating it. We have some honorable mentions. We have Steve Spagnuolo, who's very fun defensive coordinator. I definitely considered him. Mike Zimmer, another guy who it's crazy to not put him on the list, it feels like, but at the same time, he had the 28th defense last year. Now, I do think that was in large part a talent thing, but still, I can't quite put him in the top 10. There's a lot of good guys right here. And, maybe it can still work out, but I also wonder how well he would do, like if he didn't have like really smart players like a Harrison Smith. Like, does Harrison Smith make him look better? I think yes, but at the same time, I mean, he's had success without Smith. He's great. I'm not saying he's not. It's just I have to put him a little bit lower because of that. Leslie Frazier from Buffalo, who they only had the 16th best defense last year, but I thought that he did a great job at getting the most out of the talent that he had. And sort of the same thing with Vic Fangio, another guy who doesn't make this list. Worth noting that Fangio and Zimmer kind of as head coaches, I feel like if they became defensive coordinators, they probably could be higher on the list simply because they could simply focus on defense. I think that, it's probably easier on defense to really just focus on defense and be better at that than it is to be a head coach and try and focus on it more so than offense. I think offense, you can do both tasks better than you can defensively. That's how it seems. So again, if Zimmer and Fangio weren't head coaches, I feel like they'd probably end up higher on the list because they could just focus on that kind of thing. Number 10, I'm actually going Raheem Morris right here. This is my sneaky look out for Raheem Morris next year type of thing. Because with what he did with Atlanta, no one talked about it. Atlanta was actually like not horrible defensively once he took over. They ended the year 22nd. And I do wonder how what it could have done had had Dan Quinn just not been there and had Raheem Morris been that guy. And another, I think, stamp of approval that makes me say, okay, yeah, that's good for Raheem Morris is the Los Angeles Rams have signed him to be their defensive coordinator. And Sean McVay, it's weird because he's an offensive guy, but he knows how to get good defensive coordinators. And I think Morris was great. I mean, what Morris did in that Kansas City Chiefs game, he did just as good of a job as Todd Bowles did, quite frankly, in shutting that Chiefs offense down. Now, the Chiefs still won because, unfortunately for him, his offense also got shut down. But Raheem Morris, look out for him. I think that this is something that people are going to be surprised by now. And I think next year people are going to say 10 would be way too low. That's my prediction. Number 9, I'm going Robert Saleh, who is, he was with San Francisco, now the new head coach of the New York Jets. He's good. I mean, I think a lot of people see like, oh, well, he kind of just had that Seattle cover 3 scheme and, the pressure up front was good. So can't everyone be good in that system? And maybe, but I would also argue that with someone like Robert Saleh that's not all he did. Is last year there was a ton of, man coverage. He threw a ton of different stuff in there. He can be creative. He does what fits the defense best. And, 2 years ago, it was the Seattle cover 3. Last year, it wasn't that as much. So he transitioned and adjusted. So I think he'll be really good. And I think the Jets are in good hands there. Number 8, I'm going Dennis Allen, who is the Saints defensive coordinator. Listen, he ended up with the 7th best defense last year. So he ends up here at number 8 on the list. And one thing that I think is worth mentioning is just I love how he runs his defense. I like having 2 safeties deep, but then getting a bunch of big guys up front who can stop the run. It's part of it is team building, but I like that system. I like that scheme as a whole. And I do feel like when he mixes it up, it tends to be for the right reasons. So I have him here at number 8. Number 7, I'm going Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles, who is the defensive coordinator for Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of course, guy who just won a Super Bowl and many people gave a ton of credit for, and for good reason. He had the right defensive game plan against the Chiefs. I didn't think it was like that crazy to come up with. It's what I predicted they would come up with. So I'm not sure how much credit we give him, but we should give him a good amount of credit because especially with, the cover 2 part was kind of expected, but the way he had a ton of stunts. Once he realized that Kansas City was passing, he's like, okay, we're going to be running stunts all day. We're going to, get guys open free. And that really worked out. So again, he's one of the more creative defensive play callers in the league. He's really good. Weirdly, he's another guy who, when he was with the Jets, the defense just wasn't as good. Even just coaching wise, forget talent, even coaching wise, it didn't, perform as well. And I do think that, in doing this exercise, I'm kind of onto something that, like, yeah, you can have a defensive coach that's good, but you probably need a good defensive coordinator as well. And probably some of these guys might be better off just staying as defensive coordinators. Number 6, Keith Butler, who is the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator. I think that what he does is incredible. They had the second best defense. And to be clear, when I say, when I'm talking about where these guys finished in their defense, I'm talking about points per drive, which is my favorite stat to use. I think that's the best stat to use to determine how good or bad a team is. But yeah, Butler coached the second best defense, and he was a big part of it. They blitz a lot. They play one safety deep, and they have Fitzpatrick, who basically can cover like 2 safeties. So that, perfect fit for them. And similar to Todd Bowles in a lot of ways, I feel like you could argue kind of the same things about them. You're kind of splitting hairs between them, but Butler did have the better defense last year. So I'll give him the edge there for those 2 guys. Number 5, I'm going with technically 2 guys because I'm not going to go with 2 different guys who are on the same team, but this is Jack Del Rio / Ron Rivera for Washington, just because, they both did so good, and the defense was 3rd in the league last year. So you get that 3rd in the league when I don't think the talent was necessarily as good, but they were still able to really thrive. And they like that Seattle cover 3, but they are, what they do is, which is so important. If you're going to run that cover 3, guys have to be able to switch very well. And I think Del Rio probably has a big impact in, just coaching these guys up and getting them to be able to do that. So I'm going to primarily say Del Rio is the guy, but, with a, slight nod to Rivera as well, because obviously defensive coach there. So both of those guys are included. Number 4, Brandon Staley. So, this is interesting because one of the things I've talked about is all these really good defensive coordinators become head coaches and maybe don't do as well. So maybe there's some concern for the Chargers and for the Jets. And again, there has been some guys who have, been defensive coordinators and been even better as a head coach. We'll get to one of those at number 1. But, he had the best defense in the league last year in terms of points per drive. And I thought that it was such a creative defense where they kind of play it with it's almost like they play it it's almost like they play it as like a Seattle cover 3 scheme, but with 2 safeties deep. That's probably the best way I would describe it. Someone probably knows like an actual term for it, but it's really fun how they do that. And it worked very well. He got the best out of guys like Jalen Ramsey and Darius Williams, who, that was a huge part of their defense. And of course, having Aaron Donald helps, obviously, but he does a lot well. And so I have him at number 4. And I'm hopeful that, he breaks the curse and doesn't have a worse season as a head coach like some of these other guys have. Number 3, how about Don Martindale, who this is the kind of team that I love. The whole Ravens defense built in the back end and they scheme up pressure. And Martindale does a great job at scheming up pressure. He also can scheme up other stuff. I mean, the way that they shut down Derrick Henry was largely through scheme. So he deserves a lot of credit. Again, a lot of these defensive guys who are really good, I feel like a lot of people don't even know their names. You should know Don Martindale's name, though, because he's awesome. The Ravens had the 4th best defense. They do have an elite secondary, so that helps. But again, they have an elite cornerback room. Nothing else on that defense was, I would say, elite or, even really good. It was really just the corners. And again, I think that's the most important part of a defense. But still, it's impressive to just have kind of that one aspect be awesome and still have an awesome defense. Number 2, I'm going with Josh Boyer / Brian Flores, similar to the Ron Rivera thing. How much credit do you put on either of these 2 guys? So I'm just including them together. But, they had the top 5 defense. And I feel like you can say everything about Baltimore about Miami, except Miami's corners, maybe I would say aren't necessarily as good, or at least haven't been as good. Here's what I should say. They haven't been as good for as long. Howard had a breakout year. He hasn't been that guy in the past. So I think that you give credit to the guys who kind of coach him up and get him better. Byron Jones, I thought, was also very good for them. I'm not sure if I would say it's as good as Baltimore's, but that's okay. And I think that, all around the talent around the board, I don't think is as good as Baltimore's talent around the board, and yet they only finished one spot below them. So I think that is why I have them higher. And also just the play calling. They call the right plays every time. Josh Boyer has been incredible at it. So I got to put him at number 2. I just got to. But number 1 is still Bill Belichick. I can't not put Bill Belichick here at number 1. I just can't. How could I not put probably the greatest coach of all time at number 1? And he's a defensive guy. Obviously, you can go back to when he shut down Jim Kelly with the Giants, and he's not a thing of the past. I mean, again, I've talked about this before, but the Chargers game, the Patriots-Chargers game, watch how that was completely shut down by scheme. The Chargers got nothing going, and they were a good offense. So, I mean, he's someone who he can definitely come up with the right game plan. He can beat you. He, showed it just a couple years ago when he beat the Rams. His defenses are usually very good. Last year was kind of a down year, 18th in points per drive, but I think a lot of that was talent, not him. And I think that he's always going to get the most out of the talent that he has. So he's number 1, in my opinion. What do you have? Where do you disagree with me? Where do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.